Good morning, everyone. It's Phil Wade from Dalton Wade Real Estate Group. We're here today talking about buyer contingencies. So essentially, when you write a contract for your buyer client, they basically have two contingencies that you have to sort of keep your eye on the dates. The first one that comes up is the home inspection contingency. Since you've put in an as-is contract, what that means, so if you actually look at the as-is contract, it's item number 12, and it's the property inspection right to cancel, and then the default is 15 days, or you may have filled in the blank with a different number of days. And that basically is the amount of time that your client has to do their inspections, and if they find anything whatsoever, and they don't even have to do the inspection, they can actually get out of the contract and receive their deposits back. However, once they go beyond the number of days specified for the inspection, that contingency in essence is waived or is no longer in effect. So what can happen is that as you're doing the home inspection, sometimes you'll enter into negotiations with the seller, either for repair items or for money off. The seller is under no obligation to have to give any of those, and if your buyer wants them and the seller doesn't want them, obviously there's kind of a disagreement at that point. And then you have to let the listing agent know that you're canceling, the contract. Now, where it gets a little bit, tenuous, I guess, is when you're at the last day and you're still negotiating. So the buyer still wants to buy the property, the seller still wants to sell the property, but now it's the last day of the home inspection and you haven't come to terms. You're still discussing, kind of the final resolution. And again, none of these are things that you do sort of unilaterally, meaning without your client's input. But to protect your client's deposit, on the last day of the inspection period, you need to notify the seller's agent that you're canceling the contract. And those words need to be in the email, canceling the contract, unless whatever you're requesting is agreed to. Now, subsequently, you can agree to something different, but what you've done by doing that is you've protected your buyer's deposit. One thing to always keep in mind, when you're working with a buyer, is that those deposits potentially are at risk for you, the real estate agent, missing key dates. So if that date went by, the inspection period has now ended, and your buyer and the seller cannot come to agreement, your buyer has forfeited their deposit. They can't get out of the contract after the inspection period and get their deposit back. So if you've missed that date and that date has gone by, and then your buyer says, well, we didn't agree, I want my deposit back, the seller has every right to keep it. So that's a very, very important date and should be on everybody's radar in terms of that last day. Because again, losing buyers' deposits is just unacceptable. So that's that's the inspection. So just to summarize on that, you have X number of days. When you get to the last day or the one day before that, you need to notify the listing agent that unless what your buyer is requesting, and again, you need to let your buyer know this. Your buyer needs to tell you it's okay to send in, I'm canceling the contract. And if they do, then that's fine to do. And that, in essence, has protected their deposit. So again, everyone should read 12A. It spells it out very clearly in terms of what the responsibilities are. So that's the home inspection. The other contingency is the financing contingency, which is line number 8. Or number 8 in the contract. So again, if you've checked the contract is contingent upon the buyer obtaining a written loan commitment, for whatever type of loan they're getting. They have, right now, the default is 45 days. So this is a little bit confusing, and it's kind of why we're going through this today. So basically, they have the sooner of the 45 days if it's left blank, or 7 days prior to the closing. So if the closing is in 45 days from when the effective date of the contract is, then their financing needs to be in place on day 38. That's 7 days before the closing. So it's the sooner of 7 days before the closing or the financing commitment. Now, I just went through, where I was the listing agent, a transaction where the buyer's agent basically forgot about these dates and ended up putting her client's $10,000 deposit at risk, and severely reduce that person's, negotiating position. So when you get to that date, again, this has to be discussed with your buyer. This is not you, the agent, making a decision. No, this is you telling and explaining to your client what the financing contingency is, what that means. And what it means is that 7 days before closing, or whatever you put, if you put the 45 days, the default that's in the contract, and you're to close in 45 days, then it's 38 days. And at that point, you have to be sure that your client is going to be able to get the loan. If you go beyond that 38 days and you haven't notified the listing agent either for an extension, or telling them that if they don't give you the extension, and again, this is what you have to discuss with your buyer client, that you're exercising your right to get out of the contract. Now, the best is you have the clear to close and your buyer's gotten the loan. The next best would be you've talked to to their lender, and the lender has, to verify employment, your client is still working there. So that, it's 99% certain the loan is coming through. Where it gets a little bit more dicey is if, for instance, the appraisal's not back. Then you don't know how the property is going to appraise out. That may cause the loan not to go through. If it's an FHA or VA buyer, maybe it's the appraisal plus any inspection issues that the appraiser noted. And you can't be certain that that they're going to be able to get the loan if the appraisal came in low. So it also speaks to the importance of using a lender that actually hits the dates. That's on top of getting everything processed quickly and being able to close on time, so that when you've actually put the contract in, you've called their lender and you've asked them, okay, what's your processing time? We're about to execute the contract. How much time do you need? And then if they tell you 30 days, maybe you build in, an extra 5 days, and then you put the closing date at 35 days. Then the financing contingency would be at 28 days. They told you they need 30 days to close it. You should be good. But again, if you get to the 28th day in that situation and your client doesn't have the loan, you can't just let things go and assume they're going to get it. You need to have a conversation with your client, a conversation with the lender, because in essence, what happens, and I encourage everybody to read in its entirety, number 8, financing. What ends up happening is if you don't if you don't ask for either an extension or get your client out of the contract, you've in essence waived your contingency and your client's now a cash buyer, in essence. So what does that mean? That means that if your client isn't able to get the loan and then they don't have the cash, the seller's not obligated to give them back their deposit. So the seller can take their deposit, and that would have been forfeited because the agent didn't really, and again, sometimes even if the contingency date goes by, the seller may agree to extend because they still want to close. But it's not something that's guaranteed, and it's not something that they have to do. So being on top of the dates and understanding how the dates affect your buyer's deposits is paramount. So I encourage everybody so that they understand it, is to read number 8 in its entirety. If you have any questions, number 8 is the financing. If you have any questions, please, give me a call. I can walk you through it so that you understand it. And then again, same with number 12, the home inspection. If you have any questions as to kind of how the dates work, what they mean, please reach out to me and call me. So anybody have any questions on Periscope? All right, well, as always, I'm available for any follow-up questions afterwards, and I appreciate everybody tuning in to learn a little bit more about the home inspection contingency and the financing contingency. Thank you.